Imagine this, an 81-year-old veteran, his hands shaking not from fear but from the weight of memories only he could carry. He sat quietly in a small-town diner, his cap embroidered with the words Vietnam Veteran, a silent badge of sacrifice. Most people who saw him nodded respectfully, appreciating the courage of a man who had given his youth to defend freedoms they enjoyed every day. But then, out of nowhere, a thug swaggered in, loud, arrogant, and reeking of trouble. He looked at the old man with disdain, as though honor meant nothing. And before anyone could intervene, the thug raised his hand and slapped the veteran across the face. The diner froze. Plates clattered, coffee cups trembled on the tables. But the thug didn't know. He had just touched the untouchable. Because at that very moment the doors opened, and in walked the old man's son, not alone, but with the Hell's Angels. And what happened next would leave the entire town talking for years. It was a gray morning in Willow Creek, the kind of town where time seemed to move slowly, and the diner was the heart of it all. Veterans, truckers, farmers, and young dreamers all gathered there for coffee, pie, and the comfort of familiar faces. At one corner booth sat Frank Malloy, 81 years old, a man with silver hair and a weathered face that told stories without words. His Vietnam cap sat proudly on his head, though he never spoke much of the war. For Frank, his service was not something to boast about. It was something to carry. The waitress, Mary, placed a steaming cup of coffee in front of him. "On the house today, Frank," she said kindly. "For my favorite veteran." Frank smiled faintly, his hands trembling slightly as he lifted the cup. His mornings were always like this, quiet, steady, filled with small kindnesses. But that peace shattered when the diner door banged open. A young man strutted in, tattoos crawling up his neck, eyes scanning the room like a predator looking for prey. His name was Kyle, a drifter who had already caused enough trouble in 3 towns over. He didn't believe in respect, didn't believe in decency, only in proving he was tougher than everyone else. Kyle's gaze landed on Frank. He sneered at the cap. "Old man, what are you so proud of? Killing people, wearing that stupid hat like anyone cares." The diner went silent. Frank, calm as ever, looked up and replied softly, "That cap is for the men who never came home. I wear it for them." But Kyle wasn't listening. With a burst of cruelty, he stepped closer, and before anyone could react, he slapped Frank across the face. The sound cracked through the diner like thunder. Frank didn't flinch. He sat still, his eyes steady, though a red mark burned on his cheek. The room gasped. Mary froze, her hands clutching her apron. The truckers by the counter stood halfway, unsure if they should intervene. Kyle laughed, enjoying the fear he created. "Pathetic," Kyle muttered. "But destiny has a way of timing things perfectly." Because at that moment the door creaked open again. Heavy boots thudded on the diner's tile floor, followed by the low rumble of laughter and leather jackets marked with a name that sent chills down spines, Hell's Angels. And leading them was a man with eyes that burned with fury. His jaw tightened when he saw the handprint on his father's face. It was Jack Malloy, Frank's only son, and trouble had just met its reckoning. The diner air grew heavy, thick with the sudden silence of everyone holding their breath. Jack stood there, his leather vest heavy with patches earned through loyalty, brotherhood, and respect. Behind him, a dozen Hell's Angels filled the doorway, their presence turning the small diner into a cage. Kyle smirked at first, not realizing who he was up against. "What's this?" the old man called in his babysitters. Jack didn't speak immediately. He walked slowly, deliberately, toward his father, every step echoing like a drumbeat. He bent down, his voice low and trembling, not from weakness, but from rage restrained. "Dad, who did this?" Frank, ever calm, simply placed a hand on his son's arm. "Jack, let it go. He's not worth it." But the red mark on his father's cheek told Jack everything he needed to know. He turned, eyes narrowing on Kyle. "You laid your hands on my father." Kyle puffed out his chest, trying to appear brave. "Yeah, I did. And I'll do it again." "What's an old man gonna do about it?" The Hell's Angels behind Jack chuckled darkly. Not one of them moved yet, but the room felt like a storm about to break. Jack stepped forward, towering over Kyle. "You just disrespected a man who bled for this country. A man who raised me with honor, when men like you only know how to run your mouths." His voice cracked with emotion. "You think you're tough? Try living 81 years with scars inside and out. Try carrying the memories of brothers who never came home." The other patrons began murmuring, some with tears in their eyes. Frank, Humbled and uncomfortable with attention, shook his head, but deep down his heart swelled with pride. Kyle tried to laugh, but it faltered when he saw the unflinching rage in Jack's eyes. He suddenly realized he wasn't just facing a son. He was facing a wall of men bound by loyalty, a brotherhood that didn't forgive insults to family. Jack leaned in close, his voice a whisper only Kyle could hear. "You're going to apologize to my father, right here, right now, or you'll find out what respect really means." Kyle's bravado crumbled. Surrounded, outnumbered, and stripped of his false courage, his face went pale. With a trembling voice, he muttered, I'm sorry, sir." A Frank, ever the gentleman, simply nodded. "Respect is earned, son. Remember that." The Hell's Angels stepped back, letting the message settle. Jack put a protective hand on his father's shoulder, guiding him gently. The diner erupted in quiet applause, not for violence, but for the dignity of a man who never needed fists to command respect. As they left, the rumble of Harley engines outside filled the air, a reminder that sometimes family isn't just blood, it's brotherhood. And that day, everyone in Willow Creek learned something powerful. You never lay a hand on a man who's already given everything for others. The slap had been loud, but the lesson it sparked was louder.